Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, December 30th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and tonight we have the troubling new turn in San Diego's COVID-19 situation, starting with blunt, direct action by San Diego's new mayor. This was Todd Gloria at a short time ago announcing a plan to step up enforcement in the city.
I've ordered the San Diego Police Department and asked the city attorney to pursue fines and potentially other enforcement actions against public nuisances who choose to endanger the lives of others and blatantly and egregiously defy the provisions of state and county public health orders. This executive order is to hold accountable those who are responsible for prolonging this pandemic with their selfishness. While many have sacrificed their social lives for a greater good, others have treated this with a sickening level of apathy as their neighbors died.
Mayor Gloria says his order takes effect tonight at 11:59. He did not name any particular business or individuals. The executive order will also dial back the city's enforcement of parking rules. Now to the major announcement from health leaders. They say a more contagious strain of COVID-19 is now in San Diego. KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento has more on this new development.
A San Diego man in his 30s with no travel history is the first Californian to come down with a new strain. But Supervisor Nathan Fletcher says officials do expect to find more.
We believe this is not an isolated case in San Diego County, and there are probably other strains, other cases of the same strain in San Diego County.
The man is not hospitalized. One household contact has become symptomatic and is being tested. Mutations of the virus are common, but the CDC says this variant is potentially more transmissible. But in a conversation with Governor Gavin Newsom, the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says it's not known to cause more severe illness.
There's no indication at all that it increases the virulence. And by virulence, I mean the ability to make you sick or kill you. It doesn't seem to make it more strong in that regard. In addition, it doesn't seem to evade the protection that's afforded by the antibodies that are induced by vaccines.
However, Christian Anderson at Scripps Research was more cautious. He helped conduct the genetic sequencing to identify the strain in San Diego.
We are hopeful that this particular lineage will not have any effect or minimal effect on pre-existing immunity, whether that being from previous infection or whether that be from the vaccination. But it's really important here that we need to wait for the data.
That could be a couple of weeks. But officials say as we wait for that clarity, the tools to combat the virus remain the same. Wearing masks, washing hands, staying distance, and staying home. Supervisor Greg Cox urged that everyone heed that advice, even with New Year's Eve tomorrow.
Party on New Year's Eve during a global pandemic is putting your life at risk and the lives of your friends and families at risk. Is it really worth it?
A regional stay-home order is in place for Southern California. The state just extended it indefinitely yesterday. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
Governor Gavin Newsom says $2 billion will be spent on a plan aimed at getting elementary schools to reopen. KPBS education reporter Joe Hong explains what it will take to do this safely and for schools to be eligible for that money.
Under the governor's plan, school districts that can safely reopen elementary schools by mid-February could receive an additional $450 to $750 per student.
Here's the plan: phased in person learning strategy that would focus disproportionately on those youngest cohorts and those that are most in need.
But there is a big caveat. Only districts with a 7-day average of less than 28 cases per 100,000 residents would be allowed to reopen. As of Tuesday, San Diego County's case rate per 100,000 residents was 38. Newsom also said districts with higher percentages of foster children, students with disabilities, and students experiencing homelessness would qualify for more funding to reopen. And the state would provide regular asymptomatic testing and safety equipment for districts and counties that are in the red or purple tier of COVID-19 spread.
Safety and mitigation measures clearly, we believe, can prevent transmissions in the school setting. Transmissions among and from younger students to students, is simply not common.
One local school official applauded the announcement and says he's especially reassured by the governor's emphasis on testing and the urgent need to vaccinate educators.
He is prioritizing educators, as being at the front of the line for receiving the vaccine.
Richard Breyer is the school board vice president at the San Diego Unified School District.
So if we can get to a point that we can get the educators who are going to be working with kids vaccinated, and we're doing the kind of regular testing so that we know who has the virus and who doesn't, that's certainly, those are the two big steps, that would allow schools to open and stay open safely.
The state legislature must vote to approve the additional funding before Newsom's plan takes effect. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
And here's another look at how our numbers progressed so far this week. Another 2,400 cases were announced just today, with 37 deaths. When you add it all up, we've seen nearly 10,000 new cases in just 4 days. Nearly 1,500 people have died in San Diego from COVID-19 during this pandemic, but that's not even half of the number we lost across the country on Tuesday. Johns Hopkins University reports 3,725 deaths in the latest 24-hour period. That's a new record high. Nadia Romero has an update on the worsening COVID-19 situation at the national level.
The federal government said 20 million doses of the vaccine would be administered by the end of the year, where the numbers came out on Wednesday, and they're millions of doses short. Joe Biden is pledging 100 million shots in his first 100 days in office. Meanwhile, millions of Americans are dealing with unemployment and struggling to pay their bills and put food on the table.
A sea of cars lined up at the Central Texas Food Bank. They expect to help 1,700 families. Some people, like Jill Fowler, say they're first-time recipients of free food.
This is totally since the pandemic hit. I mean, that's what took out my daughter's job.
Fowler says she recovered from COVID-19, but thousands of sick Americans are overwhelming hospitals.
10 hours later, and there's still just as many ambulances. They don't stop coming.
LA County Emergency Room nurse Tony Catano says her hospital is running out of oxygen tanks and space in the morgue. And other hospitals are dealing with limited ICU beds.
You have healthcare providers trying as best as they can, knocking themselves out to take care of people, and they're running out of beds.
And with daily COVID cases and hospitalizations increasing, states scramble to figure out how to administer COVID-19 vaccines. Mississippi's health department says it'll roll out 18 drive-through vaccination sites next week,
targeting specifically any and all healthcare personnel.
The president said previously there will be enough vaccines for every American by April.
Thank you.
But the COVID-19 crisis continues for Americans like Fariha Hawk, struggling to make ends meet.
It gets so emotional because I'm overwhelmed. And I'm like, I don't know how to live anymore. Sometimes it's so hard.
And the economic woes for millions of Americans continue with the lapse in their unemployment benefits because Congress took too long to reach a deal and the president delayed signing that stimulus package. And health experts say the worst could be yet to come with COVID cases and hospitalizations and deaths as we account for all of the holiday travel and recent gatherings. From Washington, I'm Nadia Romero.
Vaccinated, debriefed, and quickly deployed, 75 doctors, nurses, and respiratory therapists with the U.S. Army are arriving at hospitals in Central California. This video shows them arriving at Travis Air Force Base, where they got tours of the facilities and mask fittings. The hospitals in San Joaquin County were chosen because they have the bed capacity, but not the ICU staff. With this injection of help, the hospitals hope to get to COVID patients sooner. And we're not seeing those extra measures in San Diego just yet, but just up the road, one major hospital in Orange County is setting up field tents to care for patients. Michelle Geely shows us how the situation there is escalating.
The first patients have been admitted to the newly constructed mobile field hospital at UCI Health in Orange. Doctors will treat both COVID and non-COVID patients in the tents that recently went up in the medical center's front parking lot. A total of 50 patients can be seen inside of this field hospital at one time. It's designed to handle overflow from a very busy emergency department here at UCI, as well as other parts of the hospital. The Orange County Health Care Agency posted these pictures on Twitter showing the inside of the field hospital. Before the doors opened, officials from California's Department of Public Health took a tour. It's the first facility of its kind to go up in the county during this pandemic.
They're doing what they can to help as many people as they can. So, you know, good for them for putting it up so quickly and being able to help as many people as they can. I think that's really awesome.
I mean, I think it's great. The hospitals have run out of rooms. Where else can we go?
Meantime, 5 miles away in Fountain Valley, Orange County's second mobile field hospital is taking shape. This afternoon, Fountain Valley Regional Medical staff have been wheeling in beds and supplies into the tents. This field hospital will be able to handle 25 patients when it opens next week.
And that was Michelle Geely reporting. 2020 has been a tough year, but the Padres were a bright spot, and they're giving their fans plenty of hope this week. Coming up, we'll hear from one of the team's broadcast voices on the big trades, and if we'll get to see the team in person in 2021. You might think in the middle of a pandemic, the real estate market would be in trouble, but just the opposite is true. Home prices in San Diego are at their highest in more than 6 years. KPBS reporter John Carroll explains why that's good news for some and terrible news for others.
All of us who live here know what a special place San Diego is. Sandy beaches, a stunning skyline, beautiful homes in beautiful neighborhoods. No wonder homes here have always been on the expensive side, and they're only getting more pricey. The latest S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Index shows home prices across the county are up by 11.6%. That's the highest in more than 6 years and the third fastest increase in the nation. Only Phoenix and Seattle saw bigger gains.
And the charts are just incredible. Not just the median price is going up, but the price per square foot is going up.
Professor Norm Miller holds the Hahn Chair of Real Estate Finance at the University of San Diego. He says the current market is great for both buyers and sellers.
And that can only be explained by a lack of supply and very low interest rates.
But Miller says it's only good news for those who can get the cheap financing and owners who have tons of equity in their homes. For frontline workers and others struggling during this pandemic, Miller says the first quarter of next year is likely to be very difficult. He says a lot of foreclosures are coming, with mortgage and rent relief running out, and he says help from the government will come too late for some.
I think we're going to have the bottom, say, 20% of the housing tier on price see a fair amount of distress, probably triple what we have right now in terms of foreclosure sales.
Miller says investors will then come in and, much as they did in the financial crisis of 2007 through 2010, buy up those properties and convert them into rentals.
There will be some people that won't survive this without losing their homes.
A hard fact of life in one of the most beautiful places to live. John Carroll, KPBS News.
As we move into another calendar year, KPBS wants to take a look back at some of the most memorable stories we brought you in 2020. And boy, what a year it has been. Our reporters were there to tell you the stories of racial discrimination, injustices suffered by Indigenous people, race relations in the military, and the long journey to women's right to vote. We'll take a look back on those stories in our New Year's Day newscast on Evening Edition at 5 and 6:30. That's on January 1st. And this was also a monumental year in politics as America elected a new president. But that's not all. Karen Kafa looks back on this historic year.
2020 marked the 59th presidential election year in the U.S. And just 16 days into January, it became clear this year would not be typical.
It's a hoax. It's a hoax. Everybody knows that.
Senators took an oath for President Trump's impeachment trial. The House of Representatives had charged him with abuse of power and obstructing Congress.
We began just the third presidential impeachment trial in American history.
The impeachment vote loomed as President Trump delivered his State of the Union address, cheered by Republicans. decidedly cooler with Democrats. They seemingly ignored handshake, a deliberately ripped up speech. The next day, the Senate acquitted President Trump. With a trial done, the campaign trail called.
Iowa, you have shocked the nation.
Pete Buttigieg won the Iowa caucuses, though voting delays overshadowed the win. Bernie Sanders won the New Hampshire primary. Joe Biden was 4th in Iowa, 5th in New Hampshire. Then South Carolina's win turned the tide.
This is your campaign.
By April 8th, Joe Biden became the presumptive nominee, just as politics took a dramatic new turn. The death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man at the hands of police officers, as well as similar deaths across the country, sparked nationwide protests.
I am your president of law and order.
President Trump opted for a show of force after authorities used tear gas to push back peaceful protesters outside the White House. Joe Biden cited the Constitution and freedom of peaceable assembly.
We're going to not allow any president to quiet our voice.
In a pandemic, the candidates showed up differently. In June, President Trump held his first campaign rally since March in Tulsa. Crowds grew larger than health officials recommended. Biden chose virtual interviews and masked appearances. Democrats kept a socially distant convention while Republicans gathered at the White House. Then, political attention turned to the Supreme Court. Justices ruled 5-4 against the Trump administration's efforts to end DACA, the Obama-era program that protects immigrants brought to the U.S. as children from deportation. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg joined the majority opinion. 3 months later, she died of complications from pancreatic cancer, giving the president his 3rd court nomination.
Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
That Rose Garden scene proved significant days later when some who attended tested positive for COVID-19, including the president.
Far left.
He had debated Joe Biden just 3 days earlier.
The president has no plan.
Now the president flew to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for treatment. Days later, dramatically returned less than a month before the election. Record numbers were already voting early, electing the first non-binary and Muslim state legislator, the first black Missouri congresswoman, and the first woman and minority vice president. Though it took 4 days of counting before Harris and Biden were projected winners.
Folks, the people of this nation have spoken.
President Trump, who months before the election warned of voter fraud, continued to make unsubstantiated claims after the election. He unsuccessfully challenged results in courts and refused to officially concede. No White House welcome like one 4 years ago on the books. Unprecedented transition in an unprecedented year. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, as the Senate debates increasing COVID relief, we talk with a Republican lawmaker opposed to the idea. That's coming up at 7 right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
San Diego's mountains are still enjoying some of the snow that fell earlier this week. San Diego County Parks shared these photos on Instagram showing the snow on Palomar Mountain. The final day of 2020 will be a cool one. Mark Mancuso has your forecast.
A lot of changes occurring in our weather here over the next couple of days. Looks like we'll stay dry through the weekend. Next week, though, it looks like we could see some more rain, especially by, I would say, around Wednesday. For now, though, we'll be looking at the return of the onshore flow. So that means a cooler day coming on Thursday. And we'll see a brief Santa Ana giving us a visit Thursday night into Friday, so the offshore flow returns, and we'll see some mild weather Friday into Saturday. And then on Sunday, we'll be looking at some clouds around and some cooler conditions, but don't see any precipitation quite yet. For tonight, we'll drop down to 35 in Oceanside, San Diego 45. Ramona's at 26 and El Cajon's 39. Mount Laguna around 24 and Borrego Springs 33. Now Thursday, a system that's moisture-starved swings rapidly through the southwest. That will bring us our cooling for the day on Thursday. But once that skips past, we'll see the return of the offshore flow, and that will lead to the milder conditions in that brief Santa Ana. Looking at our temperatures, 63 in Oceanside and San Diego. Ramona is 61 and El Cajon at 67. And Borrego Springs 66 and Mount Laguna coming in at 52. Checking on Friday's weather, well, high pressure. Looks like some dry, pleasant weather will be with us. And on Saturday, we'll keep it dry here. The next system to the north, that's the one that will spread some clouds into us on Sunday, but no precipitation. So here's our extended forecast. Notice a cool day for Thursday, and then we're back to some milder conditions. It'll be breezy into Friday. Over the weekend, Sunday is the day we see increasing clouds, and it will be cooler. In the inland sections, temperatures will be on the rise for Friday and Saturday, then some clouds around on Sunday. And let's check out the mountains for you. You see those clouds on Sunday, low to mid-50s. And in the deserts, weather here rather uneventful, just a few clouds around. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
New big names, new hopes around the Padres these days. The signing of 2 all-star pitchers is igniting dreams of a championship season and the hope that Petco Park will reopen and give a boost to the area's economy. Here's KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer.
2-2. Fernando, a high fly ball to deep left field.
In 2020, the San Diego Padres reached the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. This week, the team further improved their roster by agreeing to trades for all-star pitchers Blake Snell and Yu Darvish and infielder Ha-Sung Kim, all of which took place in a 24-hour span. The Snell deal became official on Tuesday afternoon, and the Darvish trade was finalized Tuesday night. The Kim signing is expected to be completed soon. Padres radio play-by-play broadcaster Jesse Agler says the Padres are going all in to win the World Series.
Based upon what they did last year, the success that they had last year, and then adding the kinds of pieces that they've been adding this week, it just means that on paper, coming into this 2021 season, they will be, there's no debate, they will be one of the 2, maybe 3 best teams in all of baseball. And that means it's going to be as anticipated as any season we've ever seen around here.
But when can fans anticipate sitting in the bleachers singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" and looking for foul balls to come their way? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention projects COVID-19 vaccines to be widely available to the general public between the late second quarter or third quarter of 2021. That has led to some optimism that fans may be able to see part of the season from seats inside Petco Park. Wednesday afternoon, a chef working at one of the only restaurants open in Gaslamp said he sure hopes that's the case.
We missed out a lot of last season. You know, the team had one of the greatest seasons we've had in a long time. So, yeah, it definitely hurt us.
The degree of talent acquired through the Padres trades is immense. When fans can fully return to the stands, Agler expects a full house.
I think everyone is optimistic that at some point this year, you'll be able to have fans back in the ballparks all across the country. How many fans, at what percentage capacity, obviously, is something we'll have to wait and see.
National League West rivals in the reigning World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers are still the team to beat. But the Padres seem to have narrowed the gap significantly with their roster changes over the past few days. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
An art gallery in Hillcrest learned to pivot long before the pandemic. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando speaks with the Studio Door's Patrick Stillman for this pandemic profile.
5 years ago, Patrick Stillman opened the Studio Door in North Park as a place where art and commerce could intersect. But he encountered setbacks and had to close the business. The Studio Door reopened early last year at its current location in Hillcrest. But then 2020 hit.
In March, it was very daunting because everything truly shut down. So we went dark, but I think that as an owner of a business, I was working twice as hard trying to come up with ideas of how to stay relevant.
Like all arts organizations, the Studio Door has had to deal with pandemic restrictions that no longer allow for the kind of in-person events that were a mainstay of the arts community. But Stillman is an artist who prides himself on also being a good businessman.
When the opportunities came to seek out government assistance, I went in full force. I'm one of the few small businesses that benefited from PPP, disaster loan. Without those funds, I don't think we would have been able to stay open. But in some ways, especially with the loan from the federal government, I think, man, I've worked so hard to put myself into so much debt. It's been a challenging time for the business, but I think even more so for hardworking artists. Those artists that are professional artists trying to make a living at art are having some really serious times trying to maintain a studio practice get their art in front of people who are interested in purchasing it. It's been really challenging.
But he found a way to keep artists working in their studio spaces.
Studio artists are considered light manufacturing, so as long as they keep to their studios, they're allowed to be in the space and continue working.
But with businesses closed or working under restrictions, foot traffic has been heavily reduced in Hillcrest, leaving the gallery in a bit of a ghost town. Looking ahead, Stillman is proceeding with his regular January programming featuring 6 artists in the main gallery.
The challenge now is to come up with ways that we can do that in person, but also online. And so we're doing a lot more artist videos, interviews.
If there's a silver lining, then it's that some of the innovations employed to stay open during the pandemic will prove useful even after the lockdown restrictions subside.
Arts organizations like the Studio Door have been able to come up with innovative online programming that we didn't really have the time or didn't feel was as a top priority in the past, is now becoming an essential part of how we operate.
Stillman looks forward to when the gallery can return to being a physical and not merely virtual gathering place for the community. Until then, artists will have to continue to tap into their creativity. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.